So I assume among all the amazing ideas you see very early, like 90% plus of them end up failing. What would you see as being the typical founder mistakes for AI ML companies in particular?
I do think the 90%, not to be too pedantic, but I think the 90% rule is not necessarily true today. I think that founders are getting more savvy, they're getting more networked with each other and trying to avoid some common mistakes. I think one of the things that I see in AI ML is that sometimes these folks have come from big companies where they feel like I need 12 people to do anything. And that's where the grad school scrappiness of 2 to 3 people, like a 6 person project in grad school would be like, crazy, amazing, huge team. And then 12 in a big company that does AI ML would seem like a very small team. So I think that sometimes I've seen people overhire, and then the seed amount they raised, which is of course bigger than the seed amount people raised 2 years ago, it doesn't last. And so you really need to use your seed money to show some forward progress. And so it's super tempting to hire all your best friends. I did it. I also ran into that mistake personally. But no, I mean, I do see it out in the wild as well right now. And I'm not sure why it's more prevalent with AI ML companies. I think that people who have a lot of experience with these industrial models sometimes do come from the big tech companies where they're used to big teams.
I really appreciate the counterintuitive, the 90% rule may be outdated. I think that's a perspective that people default to. But to hear that, I think is really interesting because I have seen like a stronger network and connections with engineering, not just engineering leaders, but founders as well. And I think that like that networking is definitely a trend that is increasing with a lot of different folks in the community space.
I feel some of this overhiring might come from like this general sense of urgency in the valley. You raise a bunch of money, you have to grow very fast and be seen as a rocket ship to be able to like hire the best people. Is that some pressure that you see founders putting on themselves?
Yeah, maybe. But one of my quotes, which I tell people, is when you set out your plan, you can't miss all of your sales targets and make all of your hiring targets. Those kind of things have to be in line. And so what people do is they just say, here's my plan. I'm going to march towards the plan. And it was super optimistic on the sales front and on the revenue front, and then maybe more realistic and achievable on the hiring front. And so they still kind of march ahead with the plan. Whereas, if a startup is a model in and of itself, I think that you need to constantly reevaluate where you are and on what direction you're going in and whether the growth is appropriate or even the plan was appropriate. Maybe who you thought you needed to hire isn't who you need to hire.
And speaking about sales, what do you find different about finding product market fit for an AI ML company from a traditional software company?
I'd say early on, one of my worries about AI companies is they were sort of like Swiss Army knives. The early companies said, oh, it can cut, it can open beer cans. It has not a particularly amazing knife on it. It was to me more like a consulting model. I have this AI knowledge, I can do anything with it. But if you look at the market, there's more kitchen knives sold than Swiss Army knives. There's more scalpels sold than Swiss Army knives. So actually kind of knowing what you're doing and knowing what market you're going after is usually better than the Swiss Army knife / consultative approach.